been a little over a week since the NAR settlement statement, and I wanted to take some time to just talk about it from a real estate agent's perspective and give you some advice. And this could actually be beneficial, I think, for the average consumer, but also the realtor who follows our channel. So let's just back up real quick and talk about what actually happened. There was a lawsuit that happened a few years ago. I think it's when it started in Missouri, and it was against a few national brokerages. I think Keller Williams, maybe Berkshire Hathaway. I don't know all of the defendants, but National Association of Realtors was one of them. So therefore, it by extension impacts the entire trade, right? Our real estate community as a whole, because most of us are part of this trade association, the National Association of Realtors. And the allegation was that there has been price fixing or collusion between brokerages saying, this is what I'm going to charge. What are you going to charge? Let's basically fix the price. Now, there did become a standard in the commission somewhat. Locally, you would see most people cooperating at a certain percentage in local markets. Nationwide, I do feel like it definitely varied. And part of going through real estate school, one of the things they hammer in you is you cannot price fix your commission. We're not really even allowed to discuss it or to strategize about it outside of our brokerage. So that was a totally false allegation. I think that the reason they felt that way was because there became somewhat of a standard. So if I go on a listing appointment and the seller tells me, well, this is what the other agent's going to charge, I may say, okay, great. Well, I'm going to charge the same so that I can win their business. We're getting the same comp, but maybe I'm going to provide a little better service. Now, there were brokerages and real estate agents that took a different position. There was several. I mean, I'm going to say a good majority of agents came up with different commissions, price structures, and what they were willing to work with for the effort that it takes to either represent a seller or a buyer. So there was flat fees, there was discount brokerages, there was a lot of different price structures and commission options being presented to a seller. Part of the issue that the public was saying is that, well, the seller is paying for the buyer's agent. So just like in court, they felt like the plaintiff has their own attorney and the defendant has their own attorney, right? So they were saying that the seller needs to hire their own realtor to represent their best interest, and the buyer needs to hire and pay for their realtor and their best interest. Now, here's the issue. The seller, it's not as cumbersome for them to pay a realtor because it's coming out of the proceeds. It's not money that maybe they had saved up in their bank account that they're having to write a check for. Realtors only get paid when a property sells. The general public may not know that. Maybe they think that we get paid an hourly rate or a salary rate. And that's not the case. In fact, real estate is such an amazing industry. Part of the concern I think some people have is that there's a pretty low barrier of entry. You have to go to a class, take a test, pass the state and national tests, and pass a background check, and then you can be a realtor. Virtually anyone can be a realtor. However, the rate of failure amongst realtors is really high. I mean, it's something like 70% of new agents get out of the business within the first year. Why is that? Because it's a highly competitive industry. It is a highly demanding and taxing occupation. There's a lot that goes into helping a buyer make an emotional, financial decision for themselves and their family, and then helping a seller sell their property. There's a lot of moving parts. It's not just putting a sign in the yard and waiting for somebody to come and make an offer. There's a lot more that goes into it. And so the issue was, okay, a seller needs to be represented and a buyer needs to be represented, and the seller shouldn't pay the buyer's agent. But as I mentioned, it's not cumbersome for the seller to have to pay the realtors because it's coming out of the proceeds. However, the flip side of that is on the buyer side, if what NAR is settling and what this lawsuit is wanting to have happen happens, they're going to say only the buyer can pay the realtor, or that's what they want, right? I don't believe that's what's going to happen, but that's what they want. And so that means that, let's say it's a $300,000 house and the realtor's getting, let's say, between 2 and 3%, which is a living wage for as much work goes into the transaction. So now you're talking about what is that? So 300,000, 2% would be $6,000. Am I doing the math right there? $6,000 to $9,000. That's coming out of the buyer's pocket on top of their closing costs, which, you know, that tends to be about 6%. That covers your appraisal, loan origination fee, your first year homeowner's insurance, and there's a lot of other miscellaneous charges that come from all of the different things that happen with their loan and the type of loan. So that's just a down payment. And then that's just a closing cost. And then on top of that, you have the down payment. So if you're putting 20% down of a $300,000 property, that's $60,000, right? If I'm doing the math right. If you're getting an FHA loan, that's 3.5% down. And there again, it's like $9,000 or $10,000 or a little over 10,000. So if a buyer doesn't have a significant amount of savings, they're not going to be able to pay their realtor on top of their closing costs and their down payment. So the way it was working was essentially it was built into the price, right? Whatever the home was worth, and whatever agreed upon price that everyone came to, the seller was happy with their net check, the buyer was happy with their mortgage payment and their, the amount that they were offering for the purchase price. The commission for both parties came out of both sides. And an argument could be made that it's not the seller who's paying it, even though that's a line item on their settlement statement. It could be made that it's coming from the buyer because the buyer is the one that's bringing the money, not the seller, right? So what's going to happen if they had their way where a seller would never contribute to a buyer agent and all buyers had to hire their own agents, the buyer might opt to not be represented. And so that puts them having to, find their property that they want to look at, call 100 different agents, the listing agent directly. And some listing agents, if they signed an agreement with their seller that they would not write a contract for a buyer, they would not essentially have a conflict of interest where they're doing both sides, that buyer may not even get a view of property if they don't have their own agent. And besides that, let's say they came to me as a listing agent. I have 21 years of experience. I've sold thousands of houses. I have a lot of negotiation skill that I've developed through the years, and the average buyer is not going to be able to come up against me, right? My job, my fiduciary responsibility is to my seller to help them get the highest and best price. I have no agreement with the buyer. I have no loyalty to the buyer unless they've signed an agreement with me. So, and the only way they could sign an agreement with me is if they were willing to pay. So that's how it could play out. And that's why I think a lot of agents were concerned that what is this going to do? This is going to knock out the average buyer from being fairly represented in America when they're going to purchase their home. And I mean, for me, I work with a lot of first-time home buyers. That's something that I'm very passionate about. I love seeing a young couple buy their first home and really start on that path to building wealth for their family. The biggest asset, the largest asset most Americans have is their home. So this is a big deal. And I believe that there's some hidden agenda that's going on where some people, and in fact, it's actually on certain organizations' website, you will own nothing and you will be happy. And it's sickening. So I think that there is an agenda that they do not want people to own homes. Why? Because it's easier to control someone who is renting. And big corporations are coming in, purchasing all of these investment properties, these properties that really would be perfect for the first-time homebuyer, the starter home. They're buying them and they're turning them into rentals. So it's becoming harder and harder for a young couple to come in and buy their home. I bought my first home in 2007, I believe. It was $35,000, and so, and I do live in an area that the average price is less than the national average, but my point is, I mean, I'm so grateful that we got into buying property when we did, because I frankly don't even know if it's going to be a possibility for my son when he grows up. He's almost 12, and I really hope that homeownership is still a thing. I mean, I'm genuinely concerned. So how can we handle this as realtors? If you're a consumer, feel free to tune in. I mean, continue to watch, because I want you to understand why it's beneficial to use an agent and how I believe we can combat this. So it's really important as agents that we stand in the way, right? We do not let whoever's agenda is at play here, we don't let them bulldoze the American dream of home ownership. We are standing in the way. So how do we do that? We continue to educate our clients. Part of the thing that I do agree with the settlement is I think you always, as a buyer's agent, you should always sign an agreement with your buyer. They should understand that you're working for them. And, on the buyer agreement, you can outline your fees and explain, here's what I charge. This is what I need to make to have a living for my family, to support my family. I'm not doing this out of charity or for my health. I'm doing this to make a business. However, here's how I help my buyers win. Here's how I can make sure you're not overpaying. Make sure that you're fully protected through the process, that I'm looking at things that maybe you don't even know are a possibility on the contract or in the home, right? So we need to fully convey our value, explain to the buyer what the fee is. And then what I think is great is we can seek to be compensated by the seller. And as a listing agent, I am definitely educating my sellers on why that's important. And so we're still going to, I'm going to prepare my seller that this is the way we need to be prepared to compensate the buyer, so that the buyer's agent, so that the buyer isn't hindered from making an offer. They're not financially burdened, so they can, have money for their down payment. They can have money for their closing costs. So that is so, so important. Have a buyer's agency with your buyer, explain the cost to them should the seller decide not to compensate. Have some ability to find off-market properties. It might be beneficial for you to subscribe to some services that give you access to that. I personally use Celebrity Agent, and I love that system. I've already gotten over 20 listing opportunities in 9 months from that system. And basically, my clients, as a buyer, if they hire me as their buyer's agent, they can give me their search criteria. I can put it into my database and I can find how many properties, according to the county, meet that search criteria, whether they're on the market or off the market, can see when they sold, and then it'll automatically send a letter to that homeowner asking if they want to sell. And it is working. I'm finding my buyers properties that they're not having to compete with. So as a buyer's agent, look for extra services like that you can offer. Get really good at communicating with the other realtor. I had a deal yesterday. We were going to be up against multiple offers, and there was an offer deadline. So I called the listing agent. I asked him, okay, what's important to your seller? What do they need? Right. And so having a good communication, I found out in that sense, this lady was wanting to move to another home in town, wanting to downsize. She wanted ideally to close in the summer. So I'm finding all this information out as a buyer's agent. That's the skill that I bring to the table. I'm able to collaborate with the other agent to make sure it's a win-win for all parties. Thus, as the buyer, putting you in a better position to win in a multiple offer situation. Those are the things that you need to be doing as a buyer's agent. So Hopefully this was a few good tips for you. I don't think any of us should panic. I believe that if we all stay level-headed, stay united together, and we don't try to undercut each other, that we don't have a race to the bottom. I mean, definitely we should all, the takeaway should be commissions are negotiable, right? So another big thing that a lot of people are forgetting is that you cannot ask the seller to compensate you more than you've agreed to with your buyer. So if you agree to a flat fee or a low percentage, you can't turn around and ask the seller to pay you more. So you do have to make sure that you're having that hard conversation with the buyer up front and letting them know, here's how this could play out. This is what it would cost me or cost you. Should we not be able to have the seller cover? But I do believe 9 times out of 10 sellers, if we can structure this in a way that it's a win-win for all parties, sellers will not have a problem with putting it into the contract. So that's my 2 cents on the NAR settlement. It's disappointing that we're seeing press conferences and things come out that has a lot of misinformation. Just for the record, commissions have never been set or required or mandatory. They've always been negotiable. And yes, as realtors, we can set our rate. We can say, this is what I'm willing to work for. But if you're not happy with that and you don't want the service that I'm going to provide, you can go to the next agent and get a totally different set of services and a totally different commission rate. So I hope that the American public realizes that there's this narrative that the realtors are the big bad people, but actually we're just small business owners and we have families and we're trying to, live our life and also help our clients reach the American dream of home ownership or help our sellers keep more money in their pocket at the end of the day. So we're for our clients, and we have a really important part in America. And like the GDP, I don't remember what percentage, but it's a huge percentage of the GDP is real estate. And we're part of that. So each realtor should take pride in that and know that we really do contribute to our economy, and it's important that we stand together so we can continue this and we can continue to help people buy real estate. All right. That's all I have for you today. I'm Jessica Hensley. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more information. I'm here to help you reach your real estate goals.